Infernal Cry is special as a Warcry, in that it has a bonus mechanic in addition to the standard exertion and buff components. Monsters within its radius will be debuffed, and if they die while this debuff is in play, they'll explode, dealing 8% of their maximum life as fire damage in an area around them. Interestingly, you can actually improve this on-death explosion with any support gems that are linked to Infernal Cry. As long as those gems can apply to the explosion, they'll boost the damage it deals. The damage from these explosions is also improved by other general character stats, such as increased damage or fire damage, or ignite-related stats if the explosion inflicts an ignite. Since Infernal Cry has an 8-second cooldown, it's never really been a particularly useful mechanic for general map clearing, but it's always been extremely effective for more specialised clear, like harvest plots. However, in Phrecia, we have access to the Ancestral Commander's Call of the Ancestors Notable, providing 120% increased Warcry cooldown recovery rate. And so, getting a very low cooldown on Infernal Cry is not only possible, but it's trivial. With the Call of the Ancestors Notable combined with the Deep Breaths Warcry Wheel on the tree, and a 20% quality Infernal Cry and 20% quality Autoexertion, the cooldown of Infernal Cry goes from 8 seconds to just over 2 seconds. And if you wanted to, you can even continue to improve on the Warcry cooldown with Warcry CDR tattoos. Additionally, while Autoexertion support prevents the triggered Warcries from buffing the character or their allies, it doesn't prevent the Warcries from applying debuffs to monsters. And so with this, I set out on a bit of an experimental build concept. A walking simulator Righteous Fire Infernal Cry Autobomber, designed with the purpose of simply farming tier 16 maps for Eldritch Ichors and Embers. And that's exactly what I ended up with. I focused on scaling area of effect, simply using the minimal damage from Righteous Fire to trigger Infernal Cry explosions on trash mobs, and using that damage to be able to kill tankier monsters. Infernal Cry has a giant area of effect, and is going off automatically every 2 seconds or so, while the debuff duration is longer than its cooldown, so any monster even remotely in our vicinity gets tagged by the debuff. And that's pretty much it. The build does what I wanted it to, and I've been able to farm up currency for the next build. However, even though the interaction here is cool and I enjoyed exploring the concept, one thing was obvious to me even early into progression. This is just a vastly inferior version of Chieftain RF. Obviously, Chieftain isn't playable in this event, but I still ended up making the comparison. Chieftain is able to pull off an average of a single 500% monster life explosion in a pack of 20 monsters. Infernal Cry, on the other hand, would make each of those monsters explode for 8%, scaled up by 2 support gems, ends up coming to about half of the total damage in terms of monster life. And while Infernal Cry is consistent where Chieftain's Hinakora explosion certainly isn't, there's more flaws even beyond that, like the socket pressure of having an additional Warcry Autoexertion link in your gear, and its mana reservation. There's also the fact that the explosion on Infernal Cry simply isn't enough to make Ignite feel good, so you need to invest into hit scaling instead, where the ignites resulting from a Chieftain's Hinakora explosion is one of the best parts of that setup, so much so that you can even utilise them for single target damage using Penance Mark. The only real saving grace for Ancestral Commander compared to Chieftain is that it's going to be tankier in late gear progression, where the extra endurance charges and built-in mini Defiance of Destiny really make their mark. Not to mention the Born Under Fire notable to help with physical mitigation. Overall, an interesting experiment and a fun build to just run through tier 16s, and to be fair, I haven't really pushed it as far as it can go because my gear is terrible. Most of it is just random pieces from my stash that I just threw on in white maps and didn't look back. But I can't recommend it. The single target damage is terrible if there are no ads nearby, which is partially on me because I wanted to use a Calm's Heart and make the laziest build possible, but you can of course, if you wanted to, just improve on that by simply using a Fire Trap 6 link in the body armor instead of using Calm's Heart like I did. Cool concept, mixed results. Now on to the next build.